Once upon a time, not too long ago and not too far away, in a kingdom much like our own, winter arrived and made itself comfortable. It was the kind of winter that settles in and refuses to leave. The days were dark and cold and snowy, and the nights were freezing and lonely. Winter hung around for weeks, and everyone was getting tired of it. The villagers huddled together in their huts, trying to stay warm by the fire, and they complained bitterly about how cold it was. "Oh, we're doomed," they said. "We'll freeze before the rooster crows." And they did their best to ignore the icy wind howling outside. Now, one young squire wasn't convinced that they were doomed, but he couldn't really offer any solutions either, because he didn't have any firewood or thick furs to keep him warm. And he certainly didn't have a fancy wizard spell to summon a roaring fire or a banquet fit for a king. He just had half a potato. Not very useful, right? The other villagers might have scoffed at this idea, but the squire was desperate, so he stuck the potato on a stick and went out into the snow. He found a tiny ember, maybe the size of a beetle, still glowing in the ashes of a cold fire, and put his potato on it. Then he sat down next to the dying embers and slowly started roasting his humble dinner. The other villagers peered through their windows and saw the squire making his little fire and eating his potato. Some shook their heads, and some tried to be hopeful, but the majority just snickered and mocked him. "Ha ha, young squire, what are you doing there?" they called out. "You think that little potato is going to save you from the cold?" They thought it was funny to watch him struggle to get his fire going and to eat his meager meal. But the squire just smiled and kept on warming himself next to his tiny flame. As the night dragged on, more and more people began to peek out of their windows. At first, they only saw the flickering light of the fire and the shadow of the squire, but then they noticed something else. The shadows around the squire were growing longer, which meant that the night was passing and the dreaded darkness was receding. And most importantly, the squire was still alive. Not only that, but he seemed happy. He hummed to himself and ate his potato with relish, even though it had turned into a bit of a charcoal briquette by now. It wasn't exactly delicious, but it was warm and filling, and the squire felt grateful for it. Soon one of the braver villagers stepped outside, huddling close to the squire. Young squire," he stammered, Could I share your fire?" The squire looked up and grinned. "Of course," he said, "there's plenty of room here, and this potato has got lots of calories." He gestured to the end of the stick, where a few morsels of potato still remained. "It's nothing fancy," he added, "but it keeps the cold away for a while." The second man sat down and warmed his numb fingers and toes. After a while he said, "Thank you, young squire, this really helps." And he took a piece of potato on the tip of the stick and ate it slowly, savoring its warmth. A few minutes later, another villager appeared. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, and the first two men said, "Of course." As they huddled closer to the squire's fire, they shared their last pieces of potato. "Here, eat this," they told him. "It's no use to us now, but you need your strength." The young squire kept a sharp eye on his fire. Soon, more and more villagers came to his little campfire. Each of them brought something to eat: bread, cheese, sausages, dried fruit, nuts, wine and ale. They gathered around the squire's fire and ate their humble supper. None of it was particularly fancy, but it was warm and filling. Afterward, the squire passed his potato stick to whoever wanted to roast another one. But there weren't many potatoes left in the village, and so eventually the villagers had to start gathering stones and wood to make a proper fire. The squire helped them gather material, and soon they had built a large bonfire that crackled merrily in the night. The villagers cheered and sang and danced around the fire. Their voices rang out across the frozen land, chasing away the loneliness and fear that had crept into their hearts during the long, dark days of winter. And somehow the night didn't seem so deadly anymore. Now, You might think that the squire was some kind of genius who saved the day, but actually he wasn't. He was just a regular guy trying to get by like the rest of them. In fact, he was probably in a pretty bad position. Being a squire means you're not a servant, but you're also not a knight. You're kind of in between, not respected enough to get your own potato patch and not lowly enough to get free food from the kitchen. Plus, he was young, so he probably didn't have much experience hunting or foraging for food. But despite his situation, he managed to figure out that half a potato and a little ember could keep him alive for at least a while. And that decision changed everything for him and the people in his village. You see, the thing about surviving isn't about waiting for a giant fire or a miracle banquet. It starts with one ember or one potato. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much, but sometimes that's all you've got. And if you use that one potato or that one ember to its fullest potential, it might just turn into something bigger, like a bonfire or a feast. And that's why I love the story of the young squire. It reminds us that surviving isn't about waiting for perfect conditions. It's about doing what you can with what you have. Maybe you've got half a potato and a single ember. Maybe you don't even have that. But if you look around, you'll probably find something that you can use. A fallen pine cone, a scrap of cloth, a rusty nail, a broken mirror, anything at all. Then you use whatever you find to create something new, a spark, a flame, a shelter, anything that will help you survive a little longer. Because survival isn't just about the end goal, it's about all the small victories along the way. Keeping your hands warm for a little longer, having a full belly for a few hours, waking up to a new sunrise, even if it's still freezing outside, that's what matters. And who knows? Maybe you'll surprise yourself. You might have half a potato and a single ember, but you never know when those two things might turn into something great. I'm here to tell you that there's more to come. Are you ready for the next chapter? Then please subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode.